The starship Horizon moved slowly through the dark space between stars. It had been traveling for 18 months, and now it was finally close to its goal. Through the large windows of the observation deck, Commander Daniel Hayes could see the blue and silver planet called Velkira, Prime growing larger with each passing hour. Daniel was a tall man with gray hair at his temples and calm brown eyes. He had spent 20 years in the space fleet, but nothing in his career had prepared him for this moment. Humanity was about to meet the Velkari, the most powerful species in the known galaxy. The Velkari were not powerful because they had big weapons or fast ships. They were powerful because they could read minds. For 8,000 years, they had used their telepathic abilities to bring peace to dozens of alien civilizations. When two species went to war, the Velkari would touch their leaders and understand their thoughts perfectly. They would find common ground and build bridges between enemies. The galaxy trusted them completely. Now they wanted to meet humanity. Lieutenant Lavra Bennett walked up to stand beside Daniel at the window. She was the ship's cultural liaison, which meant her job was to help humans understand alien customs and avoid making mistakes. She was younger than Daniel, with short brown hair and green eyes that always seemed to be thinking about something important. The Velkari delegation will arrive in 3 hours, Lavra said. I've been reviewing the first contact protocols all morning. Daniel nodded without looking away from the planet. What should I expect? Lavra pulled out a small tablet and scrolled through her notes. The Velkari communicate mainly through touch telepathy. When they meet a new species, they perform something called the First Communion. Their leader will place his fingers on your temple and read your surface thoughts and emotions. It's how they judge if a species can be trusted. Does it hurt? No. Every species that has gone through it says it feels pleasant, like a warm wave moving through your mind. The Velkari are very gentle. They only read what you allow them to read. Daniel finally turned to face her. And if they don't like what they see? Lavra hesitated before answering. That has never happened. The Velkari have performed the First Communion on 237 different species over 8,000 years. They have accepted every single one into the Galactic Concord. They believe that all thinking beings share certain values deep down. Love, hope, the desire for connection. They always find these things. So we have nothing to worry about. We have nothing to worry about, Lavra agreed, but her voice was not as confident as her words. The next 3 hours passed slowly. Daniel went to his quarters and put on his dress uniform. He looked at himself in the mirror and tried to see what the Velkari would see. A 52-year-old man from a small town in Ohio. A man who had lost his wife to cancer 5 years ago. A man who still missed her every day, but kept going because that was what she would have wanted. Would the Velkari understand that kind of love? Would they understand the pain that came with it? He shook his head and pushed these thoughts away. This was not the time for doubt. The main hangar bay had been prepared for the arrival. The crew of the Horizon stood in neat rows, wearing their best uniforms. Daniel stood at the front with Laura on his right and Dr. Kevin Marsh, the ship's chief medical officer, on his left. Kevin was a big man with a kind face and hands that were surprisingly gentle for their size. Here they come, Kevin said quietly. A small shuttle emerged from the direction of the planet and glided into the hangar with perfect grace. It was made of some kind of crystal that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows across the walls. The door opened without a sound, and the Velkari stepped out. There were 5 of them. They were tall and thin, with bodies that seemed to be made of living crystal. Their skin was translucent, and Daniel could see light moving inside them like slow lightning. They had 2 arms and 2 legs like humans, but their hands had only 3 long fingers. Their faces were smooth and elegant, with large dark eyes that reflected everything around them like mirrors. The leader stepped forward. He was taller than the others, and his crystal body had a faint golden color that the others did not have. When he moved, it was like watching water flow. "I am High Empath Zerathan," he said. His voice was strange. Daniel heard it with his ears, but he also felt it somewhere deeper, somewhere behind his eyes. "I speak for the Valkyrie people and for the Galactic Concord. We welcome humanity to the threshold of unity." Daniel stepped forward and bowed his head slightly, as Lavra had taught him. "I am Commander Daniel Hayes. I speak for the people of Earth. We are honored by your welcome and grateful for this meeting." Zerathan's dark eyes studied Daniel for a long moment. "We have watched your species for some time. You are young and full of energy. You have spread across your solar system in only a few centuries. This is impressive. We are eager to learn," Daniel said, "and eager to prove ourselves worthy of the Concord's trust." "Trust is not proven through words," Zerathan said. "It is proven through understanding. This is why we must perform the First Communion. Through the touching of minds, we will know your true nature. We will see your hopes and fears, your loves and sorrows, and you will see ours." The other Valkyrie moved to form a circle around Daniel and Zerathan. The crew of the Horizon watched in silence. Laura's hands were clasped tightly in front of her. "Who among you shall offer First Communion?" Zerathan asked. Daniel did not hesitate. "I will." He heard Lavra take a sharp breath behind him, but he did not turn around. This was his responsibility. He was the commander. If there was any risk, he would take it himself. Zerathan seemed pleased by this answer. His thin lips curved into what might have been a smile. "You have courage, Daniel Hayes. This is a good quality. Please, step closer." Daniel walked forward until he was standing directly in front of the tall alien. This close, he could see the light moving inside Zerathan's body more clearly. It pulsed like a heartbeat, slow and steady. "Close your eyes," Zerathan said softly. "Think of something that brings you peace. A memory, a place, a person you love. Let that thought fill your mind." Daniel closed his eyes. He thought of his wife, Marie. He thought of the day they got married, standing in a small church in Ohio with sunlight streaming through the windows. He thought of her smile, the way she laughed, the sound of her voice saying his name. "Good," Zerathan said. "Very good. Now I will touch your mind. Do not be afraid. This will feel like coming home." Daniel felt 3 cool fingers pressed gently against his temple. For 1 heartbeat, everything was quiet. Then the screaming began. The sound that came from Zerathan was unlike anything Daniel had ever heard. It was not a human scream. It was higher, sharper, like glass breaking and bells ringing all at once. The sound filled the hangar bay and made everyone cover their ears. Zerathan's eyes went wide. His crystalline body began to shake violently. The light inside him, which had been moving slowly and steadily, was now flashing wildly in all directions. Colors that Daniel had no names for burst across the alien's translucent skin. Then Zerathan fell. He dropped to the floor like a puppet whose strings had been cut. His body made a terrible sound when it hit the metal floor, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. The other 4 Valkyrie rushed forward with cries of alarm. They grabbed their leader and pulled him away from Daniel as if he were a fire that might spread. Daniel stood frozen in place. He did not understand what had happened. One moment everything had been calm and peaceful. The next moment the most powerful telepath in the galaxy was lying on the floor, unconscious and still. "What did you do?" One of the Valkyrie shouted at him. There was fear in the alien's voice. Real fear. Daniel had been told that the Valkyrie never showed strong emotions, that their telepathic abilities gave them perfect control over their feelings. But this alien was afraid. Daniel could see it in the way his hands shook as he knelt beside Zerathan. "I didn't do anything," Daniel said. His own voice sounded strange to his ears, distant and confused. I just stood there. I thought about my wife. That's all. Lara ran to Daniel's side and grabbed his arm. Are you okay? Did you feel anything? Daniel shook his head slowly. Nothing. I felt his fingers touch my head, and then, nothing. Just him screaming. Dr. Kevin Marsh was already moving toward Zerathan with his medical kit, but the other Valkyrie blocked his path. They formed a protective circle around their fallen leader, their dark eyes fixed on the humans with a new emotion that had not been there before. Suspicion. Stay back, one of them said. Do not touch him. I'm a doctor, Kevin said, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. I might be able to help. Your help is not needed. Your help is not wanted. The Valkyrie's voice was cold now, all the warmth of the earlier greeting gone. You have done enough. Two of the Valkyrie lifted Zerathan's S-body carefully and carried him back toward their crystal shuttle. The other two stayed behind, watching the humans like guards watching prisoners. This meeting is over, one of them said. You will remain on your ship. You will not leave. You will not send any communications. The Concord will decide what happens next. Wait, Daniel said, stepping forward. Please, we don't understand what happened. Let us help figure this out. The Valkyrie turned his dark mirror eyes on Daniel, and Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. You happened, human. Your mind happened. Stay away from us. The shuttle door closed, and the crystal ship lifted off the hangar floor. It flew out into space and disappeared toward the planet below. The humans were left standing in silence, surrounded by the echo of Zerathan's terrible scream. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Lara turned to Daniel with a pale face. We need to get to the bridge, now. They walked quickly through the corridors of the ship. Crew members stepped aside to let them pass, their faces full of questions that no one could answer. Word of what had happened was already spreading. By the time Daniel reached the bridge, everyone on the ship knew that something had gone terribly wrong. The communications officer looked up as Daniel entered. Commander, we're receiving a message from the Concord flagship. They're demanding to speak with you. Put them through. The main screen flickered to life, showing a Valkyrie face. It was not Zerathan. This was someone different, someone with colder eyes and harder features. I am Second Empath Yolanara, the alien said. I am taking command of this situation. Your ship is now under quarantine. You will power down all weapons and navigation systems. You will submit to inspection. Any attempt to resist will be considered an act of war. Daniel felt his hands clench into fists at his sides, but he kept his voice calm. We've done nothing wrong. We came here in peace. Whatever happened to High Empath Zerathan, it was not intentional. Your intentions do not matter, Yolanara said. What matters is that you have harmed the leader of our people. A being who has touched 10,000 minds without incident has been brought down by contact with a single human. This cannot be ignored. Then let us help you understand what happened. We want answers as much as you do. Yolanara was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was slightly less hostile. Very well. Your ship will remain under quarantine, but we will permit your medical staff to examine the human called Daniel Hayes. Perhaps there is something unusual about his biology, something that could explain this incident. There is nothing unusual about me, Daniel said. I'm just a normal human being. That remains to be seen. Yolanara ended the communication, and the screen went dark. The next several hours were tense and uncomfortable. Dr. Kevin Marsh ran every test he could think of on Daniel. Blood tests, brain scans, genetic analysis, psychological evaluations. Daniel sat patiently through all of it, answering questions and letting Kevin poke and prod him. Anything? Lavra asked, standing in the doorway of the medical bay. Kevin shook his head in frustration. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. He's a healthy 52-year-old human male with no unusual characteristics whatsoever. His brain activity is normal. His blood chemistry is normal. There's nothing different about him. Then why did Zirathan collapse? I don't know. Kevin ran his hands through his hair. Maybe it's not about Daniel specifically. Maybe there's something about human minds in general that the Valkyrie can't handle. Lavra looked worried. But that doesn't make sense. They've touched hundreds of different species. Some of those species must have had similar brains to ours. Maybe, or maybe we're more different than we realize. Daniel sat up on the examination table. What happens now? We wait, Lavra said. And we hope that Zirathan wakes up and tells them it wasn't your fault. But as the hours passed and turned into days, no news came from the planet below. The Concorde ships remained in position around the horizon, their weapons armed and ready. The crew grew restless and afraid. Rumors spread through the ship like fire. Some said that Zirathan was dead. Some said that the Concorde was preparing to destroy them. Some said that humanity would never be allowed to join the galactic community. Daniel spent most of his time in his quarters, staring out the window at the beautiful planet he was no longer allowed to visit. He kept replaying the moment in his mind, trying to understand what had gone wrong. He had thought about Marie. That was all. Just his love for his wife. How could that have hurt anyone? On the sixth day, a message finally came. Zirathan was awake. He had asked to speak with the humans, but what he had to say would change everything. The message from the planet came just after midnight ship time. Daniel was lying in his bed, not sleeping, just staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything that had happened. When his communication device beeped, he jumped up so fast that he nearly fell. "Commander Hayes to the bridge immediately," said the voice of his communications officer. "Priority message from the Valkyrie High Council." Daniel pulled on his uniform and ran through the corridors. Lavra and Kevin were already on the bridge when he arrived, their faces tired and worried. They had not been sleeping much either. The main screen showed the face of second empath Yolanara. Her expression was different now. The hostility was gone, replaced by something else. Confusion, perhaps, or wonder. Daniel could not tell. "High empath Zirathan has regained consciousness," Yolanara said. "He wishes to address your crew. He will speak in 5 minutes." The screen flickered and then Zirathan's face appeared. Daniel felt his stomach tighten with anxiety. The golden telepath looked different than before, weaker. The light inside his crystalline body was dimmer, and his movements were slow and careful. But his dark mirror eyes were clear and focused. "People of the horizon," Zirathan began. His voice was softer than before, like he was speaking from a great distance. "I must apologize for the fear and confusion that my reaction has caused. I have spent 6 days trying to understand what happened when I touched the mind of Commander Daniel Hayes. I'm not sure I fully understand it even now, but I will try to explain." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "For 8,000 years, my people have touched the minds of other beings. We have experienced joy and sorrow, love and anger, fear and hope. We have felt the thoughts of poets and warriors, of scientists and farmers, of children and the very old. Every mind is different, but they all share certain qualities. They are like pools of water. Some are shallow, some are deep. Some are warm, some are cold. But they are all still. They are all peaceful beneath the surface." Zirathan looked directly at Daniel, and Daniel felt as if those dark eyes could see right through him. Human minds are not like this. When I touched Commander Hayes, I did not find a still pool. I found an ocean in the middle of a terrible storm. Waves crashing in every direction. currents pulling in ways that made no sense, winds howling with 1,000 different voices. Lavra glanced at Daniel with a puzzled expression. Daniel just shook his head. He had no idea what Ziradan was talking about. Your minds are not singular, Ziradan continued. They are many things at once. You feel love and fear at the same moment. You hope and doubt with the same thought. You remember the past and imagine the future while standing in the present. You argue with yourselves constantly. You question everything, including your own beliefs and desires. He paused again, and when he spoke next, there was something like awe in his voice. Every other species I have touched has one voice inside their head. Humans have many. Commander Hayes was thinking about his wife who died. He was feeling love for her, and also sadness at her loss, and also guilt that he could not save her, and also gratitude for the time they had together, and also fear that he would forget her face, and also hope that he would see her again someday. All of these things at once, not one after another, all at the same time. Kevin leaned over to whisper to Lavra, "Is that not normal?" "I thought it was," Lavra whispered back. "It is normal for you," Ziradan said, as if he could hear their whispers across the emptiness of space. Perhaps he could, but it is not normal for anyone else. No other species in the galaxy experiences consciousness the way you do. Your minds are like explosions that never stop, like fires that burn in every direction at once. The crew of the Horizon stood in stunned silence. They had always assumed that their way of thinking was ordinary, that everyone, everywhere, thought the same way they did. The idea that their minds were somehow special or different had never occurred to them. "I was not prepared for this," Ziradan admitted. "I entered Commander Hayes' mind expecting to find a gentle stream. Instead, I found myself standing at the base of a waterfall. The force of his thoughts was overwhelming, not because he was trying to hurt me, not because his thoughts were bad or wrong, simply because there were so many of them, moving so fast, feeling so deeply." Daniel found his voice at last. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't mean to hurt you." Ziradan actually smiled at this, or made the Valkyrie expression that served as a smile. "You have nothing to apologize for, Commander. You cannot control what you are, and what you are is remarkable. What does this mean for us?" Lavra asked. "For the relationship between humanity and the Concord?" This was the question everyone was afraid to ask. The question that had been hanging over them for 6 days. Would the Valkyrie reject humanity? Would they be seen as dangerous? Would they be forced to leave and never return? Ziradan took a long time to answer. "I have spoken with the High Council. There was much debate. Some feared you. Some wanted to quarantine your entire species forever. Some thought you were a threat to the peace we have worked so hard to build." Daniel felt his heart sink. "But in the end, we decided that fear is not the answer. We have spent 8,000 years teaching other species to overcome their fears and find common ground. It would be wrong for us to abandon that principle now, simply because we have encountered something we do not understand." The tension on the bridge began to ease slightly. "However, we cannot perform the first communion with humans. It is too dangerous for us. We will need to find another way to build trust between our peoples. This will take time. It will require patience on both sides." "We are willing to be patient," Daniel said. "We came here to learn and to grow. We can wait." Ziradan nodded slowly. "There is one more thing. I would like to meet with you again, Commander Hayes. Not to touch your mind, just to talk. I have many questions about your species. The experience I had, as painful as it was, also showed me things of great beauty. I saw your love for your wife. I felt it as clearly as my own thoughts. And I realize now that I have never felt anything so powerful in all my 800 years of life. Daniel did not know what to say. He had always thought of his love for Marie as something private, something personal. The idea that an alien had seen it, felt it, was strange and uncomfortable, but also, somehow, validating. "I would be honored to meet with you," Daniel said finally. "Good." Zirathan turned to address the full crew again. "The quarantine will be lifted. You are free to remain in orbit around our planet. We will send envoys to your ship to begin the process of cultural exchange. This will not be quick or easy, but I believe it will be worth it." The screen went dark and the bridge erupted in quiet celebrations. Crew members hugged each other. Some were crying. They had been so afraid, and now they were free. But Daniel did not celebrate. He stood alone at the front of the bridge, looking out at the blue and silver planet below. Something had changed today, not just for humanity's place in the galaxy, but for his understanding of himself. He had always thought his grief was a weakness, that the constant noise in his head was something to be ashamed of. But Zirathan had called it beautiful. Maybe, Daniel thought, there was beauty in the chaos after all. 3 weeks passed after the quarantine was lifted. The horizon remained in orbit around Velkira Prime, and a steady stream of Velkari scientists came aboard to study the strange species called humanity. At first, the crew was nervous about being observed like animals in a zoo. But the Velkari were polite and curious, and soon the exchanges became almost friendly. Lavra spent most of her time working with a young Velkari researcher named Ithala. She was smaller than most of her kind, with a bluish tint to her crystalline body that the others did not have. Unlike the older Velkari, Ithala did not seem afraid of humans. She seemed fascinated by them. "Tell me about your dreams," Ithala said one afternoon. They were sitting in the ship's observation lounge, watching the stars drift slowly past the windows. Lavra thought about the question. "What do you mean?" "When you sleep, you experience images and stories in your mind. We call them dreams. All species have them. But I want to understand what human dreams are like." "They're strange," Lavra admitted. "Sometimes I dream about things that happen to me during the day. Sometimes I dream about people I know in places I've never been. Sometimes the dreams don't make any sense at all. People's faces change. Buildings have rooms that shouldn't exist. Time moves differently." Ithala's eyes widened with interest. "And you have no control over these dreams? They simply happen to you?" "Sometimes I realize I'm dreaming, and I can change things a little. But mostly, no. The dreams just happen." "This is remarkable," Ithala said. She made a note on a small device she carried everywhere. "For my people, dreams are calm and organized. We process the events of the day in a logical order. There are no surprises, no chaos." "That sounds boring," Lavra said with a small laugh. "Perhaps it is. I had not considered that before." Ithala paused, thinking. "There is something I would like to try. It may be uncomfortable for me, but I believe it is important." Lavra felt a sudden worry. "What do you want to try?" "I want to touch your mind." The words hung in the air between them. Lavra thought about Zirathan lying on the floor of the hangar bay, screaming. She thought about the fear in the other Velkari's eyes. Is that safe? After what happened to Zirathan? "I do not know," Ithala admitted honestly. "But Zirathan is 800 years old. His methods are traditional. He opened his mind completely to Commander Hayes, and he was overwhelmed. I believe that if I take a more careful approach, if I only touch the very surface of your thoughts, I might be able to experience something without being harmed." Lavra thought about this for a long moment. Part of her wanted to say no. The risk was too great. But another part of her understood that this research was important. If the Velkari and humans were ever going to truly understand each other, someone had to take the first step. "Okay, Lara said finally. But we should do it in the medical bay, with Dr. Marsh standing by. Of course. I would expect nothing less. An hour later, they were in the medical bay. Kevin had set up monitoring equipment for both Lara and Ithala. Several other crew members had gathered to watch, including Daniel. Word had spread quickly through the ship about what was going to happen. Are you sure about this? Daniel asked Lara quietly. No, she said honestly. But someone has to try. Ithala positioned herself in front of Lara. Her blue crystalline hand reached out slowly. I will only touch the surface. Just enough to feel something. If it becomes too much, I will pull away. I understand. Ithala's fingers touched Lara's temple. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Ithala's face remained calm and focused. Then her eyes began to flutter. Her breathing quickened. The light inside her body began to pulse faster. Kevin stepped forward with concern on his face. Should I stop this? No, Ithala said. Her voice was strained but determined. I am fine. I just need to adjust. Another 5 seconds passed. Ithala's body was trembling now, but she did not pull away. Her eyes were closed, and her expression shifted from confusion to wonder to something that looked almost like joy. Then she pulled her hand back and opened her eyes. Everyone held their breath. Waiting, Zala let out a long, slow breath. When she spoke, her voice was filled with emotion. It is exactly as Zirithan described, but also completely different. Are you okay? Lara asked. I am more than okay. I am. Ithala searched for the right word. I am changed. She turned to face the assembled crew members, her blue eyes bright with excitement. When I touched Laura's mind, I felt things I have never felt before. Not just emotions, but layers of emotions. Contradictions that somehow exist together. She was nervous about this experiment, but also excited. She was afraid of hurting me, but also curious about what I would find. She was thinking about her duties to her ship, and about her family back on Earth, and about a conversation she had 3 days ago, and about what she wants to eat for dinner tonight. All at the same time. All woven together like threads in a piece of cloth. Ithala paused, collecting her thoughts. My people think in straight lines. One thought follows another in order. We believed this was the only way intelligent beings could think. We were wrong. Humans think in circles and spirals. They think in explosions. They can hold contradictory ideas in their minds without being torn apart by them. They can believe something and doubt it at the same time. She looked at Lara with new respect. This is not a weakness. This is a gift. You can see problems from many angles at once. You can imagine possibilities that we cannot. You can feel things more deeply than we ever could. Daniel stepped forward. But it hurt Zirithan. It could have hurt you. Yes, Ithala agreed. Because we were not prepared. We did not know what to expect. But now we do. And I believe that with practice, with careful study, we might learn to understand your minds better. Perhaps even to appreciate them. Over the next few weeks, more experiments followed. Other Valkyrie volunteers came forward, each one touching the surface of a human mind briefly and carefully. Some found it too overwhelming and had to stop. But others, like Ithala, began to adapt. They learned to ride the storm instead of being destroyed by it. The Valkyrie scientists published their findings and sent them across the galaxy. For the first time in 8,000 years, the story was not about how the Valkyrie had brought a new species into the fold. It was about how a new species had shown them something they had never seen before. Other aliens began to visit the horizon. Species that had been part of the Concord for centuries came to meet the strange humans, whose minds could overwhelm the greatest telepaths. Some were afraid. Some were curious. Some were hopeful. Daniel watched it all from his position as commander, But his thoughts kept returning to what Zirathan had said. The Valkyrie leader had seen Daniel's love for Marie. He had called it beautiful. And he had never felt anything so powerful in 800 years of life. Maybe, Daniel thought, the chaos in human minds was not just a storm. Maybe it was also a fire that could light up the darkness. Maybe it was exactly what the galaxy needed. 2 years had passed since the day Daniel Hayes had made a Valkyrie High empath collapse on the floor of a hangar bay. In that time, everything had changed. Not just for Daniel, not just for the crew of the Horizon, but for the entire galaxy. The Valkyrie had done something they had never done before in 8,000 years. They had asked for help. The problem was a species called the HFY. They lived on a harsh world at the edge of Concord space, and for 3 centuries, they had refused all contact with the outside universe. Their planet was dying. Their sun was slowly burning out. Within 100 years, their entire civilization would be frozen and dead. The Valkyrie had tried to help. They had sent envoys with offers of new homes on other worlds. They had sent scientists with plans for artificial sun technology. They had sent everything they could think of. But the HFY refused to listen. They would rather die on their own world than accept help from strangers. And the Valkyrie could not understand why. Their minds are close to us in a way we have never experienced. High empath Zirathan explained during a meeting on the Horizon. He had recovered fully from his collapse, though he now walked with a slower step than before. When we touch their thoughts, we find only walls. Walls built from pride and fear and stubbornness. We cannot find the door. We cannot find a way through. Daniel sat across from him, listening carefully. Why did you come to us? Because human minds have walls too. More walls than any species we have ever encountered. But your walls are different. They have doors. They have windows. You can let people in when you choose to. Perhaps you understand something about walls that we do not. Lavra leaned forward in her chair. You want us to talk to the HFY? To convince them to accept help? I want you to try, Zirathan said. The Concord has decided. For the first time in our history, we are sending humans as primary ambassadors to a first contact situation. If anyone can reach the HFY, it might be you. The journey to HFY Prime took 3 months. During that time, Daniel studied everything the Concord knew about the dying species. They were reptilian beings with thick scales and sharp teeth. They had built great cities under the ground to escape the increasing cold of their world. They valued strength and honor above all else. And they believed that accepting help from others was the greatest shame a HFY could experience. They sound like humans, Megan Cole said one evening. She was the young engineer who had volunteered for Ithala's early experiments. Now she was one of the most important members of the cultural exchange team. Or like humans used to be anyway. Proud, stubborn, convinced they don't need anyone. That's what I'm counting on, Daniel said, when the Horizon arrived at HFY Prime. They found a world that was slowly dying. Snow covered everything except the areas around volcanic vents. The cities were dark and quiet. Most of their populations moved underground. It was a sad and lonely place. The HFY agreed to meet with the human delegation, though their message made it clear they expected nothing to come of it. Many have come before you, their leader wrote. All have failed. You will fail too. Daniel led the team down to the surface. They were taken to an underground chamber deep beneath the frozen ground. The air was warmer here, heated by the planet's core. Hundreds of HFYs sat in rows of stone seats, watching the humans with cold eyes. Their leader was an old female named Grathcore. Her scales were gray with age, and she moved slowly, but there was still power in her eyes. She looked at Daniel like he was an insect that had wandered into her home. You are humans, she said. Her voice was deep and rough. the species that broke the Volcari telepaths. We have heard stories about you. We didn't mean to break anyone, Daniel said. It was an accident, so they say. Grafker made a sound that might have been a laugh. Why are you here, human? Do you think you can succeed where all others have failed? Do you think you can convince us to abandon our home and run away like cowards? Daniel took a deep breath. He had prepared a speech full of logical arguments about survival and the future and the value of life. But looking at Grafker, looking at the pride and pain in her ancient eyes, he knew that logic would not work here. So he threw away his speech and spoke from the heart. I'm not here to convince you of anything, he said. I'm here to tell you a story. The chamber went quiet. Even Grafker seemed surprised. I had a wife, Daniel continued. Her name was Marie. She was kind and strong and beautiful. 5 years ago, she got sick. The doctors told her she was going to die. They offered treatments that might give her more time, but she refused. She said she would rather die at home in her own bed than spend her last months in a hospital surrounded by strangers. He paused, fighting against the emotion that rose in his chest. I begged her to try the treatments. I told her I wasn't ready to lose her. I told her I needed more time. But she wouldn't listen. She was proud, like you. Stubborn, like you. She wanted to face death on her own terms. Grafker's expression had not changed, but she was listening now. Really listening. In the end, I had to accept her choice. I couldn't force her to live. I could only stay by her side and love her while she was still here. And when she died, I was holding her hand. Daniel looked directly at Grafker. I understand why you don't want to leave. This is your home. Your ancestors lived here. Your children were born here. The thought of leaving feels like giving up. It feels like betraying everything you believe in. It is betrayal, Grafker said, but her voice was less harsh than before. Maybe, Daniel admitted. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's the hardest kind of strength there is. The strength to keep living, even when everything you love is being taken from you. The strength to build something new when the old is gone. He stepped forward. My wife chose to die at home because she was tired and ready to rest. But your people are not tired. I can see it in your eyes. You have not given up hope. You are angry because you feel like you have no choice. Like the universe has decided your fate without asking your permission. Grafker's claws dug into the stone of her chair. But you do have a choice. You can stay here and watch your children freeze to death, one by one. Or you can take them somewhere warm and safe and let them grow up strong. You can carry your ancestors' memories with you to a new world and plant them like seeds in new soil. Daniel spread his hands. I can't tell you what to do. No one can. But I can tell you this. The universe is cold and dark and doesn't care about any of us. The only warmth we have is each other. The only meaning we have is what we create together. And I think your people have too much meaning, too much warmth, to let it all freeze in the dark. The chamber was silent for a long time. Grafker stared at Daniel with her cold reptilian eyes. Then something happened that the Volcari observers had never expected to see. Grafker began to cry, but it was not a human way of crying. No tears fell from her eyes. But her body shook with silent sobs, and the sound she made was like stones grinding together. All around her, other Kethver began to cry too. You speak truth, human, Grafker said when she could speak again. Hard truth. Truth we did not want to hear. I'm sorry, Daniel said. I know it hurts. Yes, it hurts. She stood slowly, using her staff for support. But perhaps some pain is necessary. Perhaps we have been hiding from this pain for too long. She looked at her people, at the hundreds of Kethver who had gathered to watch the strange humans fail. We will talk, she said finally. Not promises. not agreements. Just talk. And we will see where the words take us. It was not victory. It was not a solution. But it was a beginning. 6 months later, the first Kethver colony ship left for a new world. Grathker was on it, carrying a box of soil from her homeland and a stone from her ancestor's tomb. It was hard for her. It was hard for all of them. But they did it anyway, and across the galaxy, the story spread. The story of the species whose minds were like storms, whose hearts were like fire. The species that understood walls because they had learned to build doors. The species that could reach into the darkest places and find something worth saving. Humanity had finally found its place among the stars, not as conquerors, not as scientists, not as warriors, but as the species that refused to give up. On themselves, on each other, on anyone. And that, in the end, was worth more than telepathy could ever measure.